Okay, Jimmy, we are sitting here in this chair.
No, I'm good. I didn't bring my bag today. Yes. What? There you go.
Somebody has already sat here.
Hi, Karen.
Hello, how are you doing, Ed? Is this your stuff?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
I don't know who that
We could be. I'm in two.
How'd it go yesterday?
There were some hiccups, but it went fine on the whole. I scribed in one session, one breakout session. It went well.
Good.
It didn't live up to my apprehensions.
This is good. That's the best news.
And I think we got some good ideas. It was percolating nicely.
Oh, good. Miss Karen. Good morning. Can you sit over there, Paul?
Well, I don't know, because I think maybe we're supposed to. There is, but I'm thinking.
No, this is the panel. You're in the next step panel. So you should be sitting up here.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm moderating, Judy.
Ah, there you go.
So that might be your computer.
Well, no, it's not.
Oh, what's your computer?
It's just that. There's a chair.
I'm sitting in that one.
Oh, you're sitting in.
Oh.
This one?
I think Ed is sitting there. I don't know. Where are you sitting, Ed?
Well, I can.
Are we short a chair? We have 5 chairs.
There are 5 of us, yes. Get one. I'll get one.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, I'm glad you're moderating.
Oh, well, thank you.
Do you need me to move?
No, just
Short chairs?
one chair short, yes.
So there are mics on the table, but I think it's going to be better if people come up and stand at the podium.
That's your chair, Dave. Oh, okay.
I prefer that anyway.
Yeah, the podium is just to my right. Corner, and she gets seated. I guess Ed said you could sit where he was in that chair there.
I don't want to take your spot.
Well, we can get another chair.
To the left is a podium. There's me and then Danielle.
There's also this mic in the middle that they used in one of the sessions yesterday.
I think that the podium mic is going to be easier for people
Okay.
to hear.
Okay.
Just based on, I mean, maybe for
Yesterday's
answers, but
feedback.
based on yesterday, I thought it was I don't know, you guys are out in the audience, but I didn't think that Janet was coming across on the mic very well.
No. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
How are you this lovely morning?
I'm just lovely. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm finer than frogs here.
Well, there you go.
I love lists. They're like a hobby.
We need 3 chairs and 1
I
and 2.
do. I mean, I'll be like
Stand by.
names
Okay,
of
good.
every
Got
pet
it.
I've had. All
Alrighty.
foods that are sticky. You know. Just love making lists.
A little,
Let's see, and the order that I was given is Danielle,
Maybe that's why I started out as a cataloger.
and then you, Dave, and then Ed, and then you, Paul.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There was no Chateau Zombie show.
And I
last
will
week.
just simply
Oh
introduce
well.
you as the
I will call my
president
people.
of the Library Users of America.
That's fine.
Okay.
Absolutely fine.
David? How do I introduce you? What is the
I serve in, I'm sorry, this evening. Serve as chair of Library Services Federation of the Blind.
library service?
Advisory
What's it called?
Committee on Library Services.
There we go.
I work for the Wisconsin Center for the Blind, which is there. My name is Pastor Bell.
They're in a bucket just in between
That's good enough. The Wisconsin Center for
Blind division.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Excuse me for one more announcement. This is your friendly flight attendant here. I'm going to be coming around with a bag to collect your coffee cups, and please make sure they're empty, your coffee cups, and any trash that you might have so that you guys can stay in your seats. Thank you.
Well, I would say Ormos would be better.
I turned it off for you through the floor.
Turn it off first.
Yeah, so you've been out there? Okay.
This is the test for the microphone that is still working. All right.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, let's put it over here.
Yeah, that way it'll roll.
Yeah, right there.
Excellent.
Are you going to run around after?
Oregon right now is
I
super
will,
west.
we can just, there'll be somebody here at the front desk. I can ask him to come in at the end of the speeches for questions. Or I can check with him and make sure there's definitely at least one person.
We just need somebody.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yep.
All right, are we on here? Is that on? I don't hear that. Is that on?
We've got some 30.
It is? I can't hear it. Okay, cool. We're going to start in just about 2 minutes. So you can
Didn't
talk
hear the
for-
mic at all.
Okay, that's what I thought. The mic is not on yet. So somebody will be happy to turn it on, I hope. It looks like it's not. Is it plugged in? That thing's hanging loose. Is that? No, that's something else. Okay. Okay. If my power is on, it's not loud enough.
Question is, why is there no...
What's this bookport here for?
I don't know.
Do you know? Is it recording? I was joking, like that cell phone commercials. Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Testing. Is that better?
Funnier.
That's better. Okay, doke. Thank you. Always good to have these things. We'll start in 1 minute.
Oh yes. I like the one where the kid says, "Tape a cheetah to her back," to make his grandma go faster.
I also like the one where it shows something about getting a kitten, and it ends where they've got an alien in the family, and the alien is eating the kitten.
Oh, like Alf used to eat cats.
Yes, all you see is the tail.
Oh
sticking out.
no, I haven't seen that one.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
They brought us lovely weather again today. Hope everyone enjoyed your evening. I know I did, and slept well. and we're ready to start a long and productive day. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Kevin Carey, who is the president of the Royal National Institute of Blind People, who has joined us today for the rest of the conference. Welcome, Kevin. Our first panel today is about selection. This is pretty focused on NLS selection as we move forward. So selection is one of the things that we do on a day in and day out basis, and we want to make sure that it's on target. So we have 4 panelists this morning, and they are going to be, this isn't my notes. Well, anyway, this is somebody else's notes. Our first panelist is Danielle Miller. Danielle is the regional librarian for the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, and she has been the regional librarian and very active in our circles for the last 5 years. So let me introduce you, Danielle Miller.
Thank you, Karen. So I have 3 areas I want to cover, and I know we have limited time, so I'll focus most on the third. But first, for the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, we have a local Braille production department. So we supplement what we get from the National Library Service by producing our own Braille. We have a collection development committee at the library that has librarians, a reader's advisor, and 2 general staff, one from our audio department and one from our shipping department, just so we can bring in different perspectives. And we subscribe to a few journals that the librarians and some of the staff pass around, seeing what's new, and we focus a lot on Pacific Northwest award books, books that are new in our area. For example, we recently did a book of poetry from our first Washington State Poet Laureate and had her come and talk at the library. So when we do something special like that, we try and link it with events as well. We will do outside requests, patron requests, and we look at those, we see if there are any reviews for the books they ask for, and we look at whether we think at least a couple other people who are our patrons will want to read that book. We don't do a book just for one person that won't have sort of a life in our collection. We just can't afford the time, really, to do that. And so we evaluate those. A librarian will look at them against our collection development policy and then take that suggestion to the collection development committee. Once we've selected books, we take them to both, we try and do the collection development committee. Let me back up for a second. We have an audio production department as well, where we make talking books. And my philosophy is sort of that if we think a book is good enough that we want to produce it, we should produce it in every format. However, sometimes it's less or more practical for one or the other. We do a lot of children's books in Braille, and we do a lot of board books and make some tactile books. And those little board books, we don't audio record typically. So there is some difference. But then we take our selections to the respective supervisors of the Braille department in this case and make sure that he thinks that it's something that we can produce and that our transcribers can produce. Sometimes we take on big jobs. There was a book about the Holocaust that wasn't in the NLS collection. And we did that. We're still doing it. It's very, very long. It's an excellent book, but that kind of leads into proofreading. We've had to pass that book around from proofreader to proofreader because they get very depressed with that book, which makes sense. And the way our Brailing operates, we have 1 staff member, and then we have currently about 17 active transcribers. We teach a transcription class each year, and we hope that most of the people that go through the class will be volunteer transcribers for us. And we provide them with software to transcribe from home. And then we have 8 proofreading teams, and they work together. And some of these teams have been partnered for 10, 12 years and have become fast friends. And the tactile Braille reader will read out loud, as probably some of you guys do this in your facilities as well, but, you know, capital letter, comma, everything that's there. And their partner is a sighted copy holder, so they catch any edits, and then we produce the book, and it goes through our Braille supervisor. So the volume there depends. We have some transcribers that are faster and some material is faster. Maybe we have a YA book and it just kind of hums along. And then on the very opposite end would be, for example, this very large Holocaust book, and everything in between. And some of the formatting with the poetry is more difficult and can take longer. But we crank them through as fast as we can. And my second section is what we do with them once they're finished. We used to emboss everything and make a couple copies and add it to our collection. But the actual physical circulation of our Braille books is quite low. Audio is, of course, the biggest, but our large print collection circulates more than our Braille collection. Our Braille collection goes between about 1.2 and 3% of our circulation, so very, very low. We found that they weren't being circulated physically as much, so now we only emboss on demand. And that's actually been really nice. I mean, the time, as someone mentioned yesterday, is really in producing the book, is not the time of making it into a hard copy or the cost of making it into a hard copy. Cost speaking, we couldn't do what we do really in any part of the library without all our volunteers. They're just amazing. So we, in the last less than a year, I think about 7-8 months, we've completed 11 Braille books. And 5 of those we've embossed on demand. So if that kind of continues, that's about 45 to 50% of our books will be embossing. And then, of course, when it comes back, we do shelve it and put it in our collection. We have our own website for downloading our web Braille and our audiobooks. And then, of course, you can access them elsewhere. And when I talk further, I'm just going to be talking about physical circulation for our library. Not the numbers for people downloading the web Braille. So we have saved money, for sure, by not embossing them. And it's been a nice response for anyone who uses CLOS. What we do is we have it set up if a patron calls or wants a specific book that we have in Braille, they put a request or reserve on it, and then that triggers our Braille coordinator to emboss a copy. And then it goes out, it gets assigned after that's been embossed and goes out to the patron. And that way it's got its catalog record in there, and then it's up on the shelf. So that's been a nice system. And the third area I wanted to talk most about, we have for a long time been wondering, why is the circ so low? Are they not reading Braille? Are they just doing web Braille? Are they just using Braille at work? What's going on? And so we started a mini survey. There were 8 questions, and we were calling our Braille readers. We started with the Braille overdue people and got some responses there, and then we put a lot of effort into calling the rest of our people signed up for the medium of Braille. And many of them had not gotten a book in a long time, but they were still signed up. And to give you an overview, we had 334 people in that category that we wanted to contact. It's pretty amazing. We got survey answers from 115, so about a response rate of 1 in 3, which we were very pleased with. And for a number of the questions, people did really take time to give us feedback and, content above a yes or no or weekly, daily, etc. So I'm going to give you the highlights, and Judy or probably someone can say if on the wiki, can everybody get to that? Does anyone know? Well, I put all the answers to the survey up, and if that's not something that people have access to, I'd be happy to provide them to you otherwise, because I'm just going to highlight a few things here. So as I said, it was 334 people, 115 responses, and what we really wanted to do was understand how people are using it, and that was more important than the production or the time or anything else, because if people are truly using that Braille, we'll do it. Then that'll be number 1 priority. But if people aren't, maybe we should put that effort elsewhere. And we have had some experiences where, and for my other NLS people out there, where things don't come back, or you send a notice in Braille and you don't hear back from them. And we're part of the Secretary of State's office in Washington, and we've worked with our elections department. And a couple years ago sent a letter out in Braille to all the people signed up for the voter's guide in Braille, saying we are considering not producing it in Braille. Let us know if that's a problem, or let us know if you can use audio or online, whatever. Oh my gosh, well, let me move ahead. Anyway, no one got back to us, but then they were mad later. So we got to hear from people. So I'm going to hustle. Our first question was, how do you use Braille in your daily life? And people had various answers, but someone actually stating hard copy Braille was 67 times out of 115, and people saying downloads or web Braille was 23 times. And the use that kept coming up the most was for labeling or notes, not for book or magazine or newspaper reading. There were a few comments on that I was going to share, but I will truck through and you can find me later, and again, I'll get you all this information. The second question was, how often do you read materials in Braille? We had 113 responses. 55 people said daily, 19 weekly, monthly 24. Some kind of hedged it, and some said not at all, was 5 people. And then a couple people said they prefer audio at this point. And we did have some people on this call drop the Braille medium. They said, I don't have time, and just take me off from that. And then we asked people what types of books they prefer to read in Braille. And nonfiction was specifically mentioned 26 times out of 89 people who answered that question. And lots of people said things like technical manuals. They want books like cookbooks, knitting, crafts, religious materials were frequently mentioned, along with the nonfiction. So not a lot of fiction-heavy requests. Then we asked them, when we're choosing material to transcribe into Braille, what do they want us to concentrate on? That was echoed again: tech manuals, home repair, crafts, cookbooks, local materials, which is our heavy emphasis, classics, and youth and children's material. People did voice the concern that kids were not learning Braille or having access enough to Braille materials. They, as adults, didn't really want anything, but they wanted kids to have it. So, which is great, that's great. That kind of came up yesterday as well. And then we asked, what keeps you from borrowing Braille? And 108 people answered that, and these are some of the highlights. 29% said their own personal reading speed. 49 said the size of Braille and storing it when they borrow it. 12 said the selection was not sufficient, and 26 specifically said they prefer audio. One comment that I'll mention is someone said synthesized speech, NLS, is not relevant. So that's one guy, right? Okay, so just one guy. And then the last question I'll mention was, how important is accuracy of Braille transcription to your reading experience? And out of 107 people, 75 said accuracy was the most important, and 18 said speed of getting a publication was the most important. And another chunk of people said it depends on the material. Like, it's really important if we go back to these tech manuals or crafts or other things, they want it to be accurate over the speed in getting it. If it's J.A. Jantz, that we do a lot, the accuracy is less important. They want the next book in the series much more quickly. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Karen.
We will be making all the information available once we get it all sorted out. So thank you, Danielle. It's very interesting. Washington's doing a lot of work, obviously. Our next speaker reminds me that there's a old saying, Confucian or somebody, and I even get this mixed up, but it's something like, the faintest scroll is more valuable than the sharpest memory. Well, faintest scroll Braille would have been a good idea for me to have written down what David Hyde just told me, because I forgot it. So he will say it again.
Go ahead.
So I do know this part. David Hyde is the chair of the Committee on Library Services for the National Federation of the Blind, and he works in Wisconsin at an organization whose name he will tell you in just a second. Let me introduce you, David.
Thank you so much, Karen. She reminds me of a quote by Spider Robinson, who once said, "Never anger a librarian, they secretly run the world." I work for the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, which is part of which is the Wisconsin School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And I get to work with teachers of blind children all over the state doing professional development, and I get to work with parents of blind children all over the state because I'm one of the parent liaisons for the state, and I also get to run our summer adult program. So I'm thinking about buying a new hat. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams. For when dreams go, life is a barren land covered with snow. Hold fast to dreams. So wrote Langston Hughes. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about today. What would be like? What is our dream? And when I was asked to talk about what we should have in a Braille collection, my first idea was a very simple one. It was one word: everything. And perhaps one day we'll get there. But since we haven't yet, we need to make some choices that will allow us to do a couple of things. First, to concentrate on those things that Braille does best. And secondly, look at those who are reading it and take their needs and preferences into account. Now, I think in Braille. I have ever since I can remember. So for me, Braille has always been there. If I had my way, everything would be available. That's, like, as I said, that's a long way off. But, you know, we have more now available to us through various sources than we have ever had. I recently served as a member of the National Library Services Collection Advisory Group, along with Ruth Hempel from Tennessee, and several others. And you can guess that during that meeting there was a great deal of talk in anticipation of this summit about what should be in a Braille collection. For those who do not know, this group is composed of regional librarians, of readers from the various geographical regions, and members of the consumer organizations. Some are Braille readers, some are not, but we all have an interest in what is in our NLS collection. So NLS has had either a policy or a propensity over the years that the Braille collection should at least tacitly represent the recorded collection. This is something we've always done, but it's not necessary that it continue that way. The advisory group, after some discussion, suggested that perhaps the policy for the Braille and recorded collections could be different, and we want to emphasize the things that Braille represents better than recordings. So, as we talked about those things, we talked about how people learn in Braille, we talked about what people use in Braille, and here are some of the things that came out of this. First, and most obvious, Braille makes it easier to read aloud. Now, I like poetry, I like things with meter and a rhyme scheme and some emotion that the reader can use to bring the audience along. I like to use dynamics, I like to use tone and change of delivery speed. I like to read aloud, and I have yet not found a way to successfully do that from a recording. I'm not going to tell you that it can't be done, but I can tell you that I don't believe I can do it. Now, we can generalize this category by extending it to basically anything that must be read aloud, and this would include things like plays, hymns, songbooks, song lyrics, liturgical materials, stories for children. These things should be in our Braille collections. So we would include things like Shakespeare, M. Samuel Beckett and Tennyson, prayer books, songbooks, hymnals, along with Mother Goose and A. Milne. Things that require attention to detail. Somebody brought up the example of tables of stock performances. Now, I'm pleased that people want those. I'm not sure sometimes whether they fall under comedy or tragedy. But in that group, we also included things like cookbooks. As Nixon almost said, I am not a cook, but those who are tell me that and our Braille readers tell me that they use their Braille cookbooks a great deal, and they find it easier to page through them and find out what they want to do and what they can do with materials they have on hand. Yes, I know we do produce cookbooks in recorded form, but from the blind cooks I know at least, they like the books in Braille better. And again, this category is extensible to other kinds of books, instruction books, how-to books, home improvement books, craft and knitting and crocheting books. You get a lot of interesting things when you serve on this collection development committee group. I once got a phone call from a lady who said that she would like NLS to produce her knitting book, and she sent me a copy on tape for me to transcribe for them. But all these kinds of things, the home maintenance, the technical manuals, things that you have to follow instructions in sequence, and you want to refer back and forth to them. You're going to do them front to back, but you want to be able to re-refer to it. That, to me at least, is easier in Braille. The next area is reference. Now, I must admit here that as a child, had they invented the word nerd, I would have qualified. I was that kid who, when I ran out of things to read, the dictionary or encyclopedia was always handy, and I read those. Now, I read them wrong. I read them front to back. So you start with aardvark and work your way to Zulu. But that's not the usual way we use them. The Collection Development Advisory Group recommended that thought be given to the production of seminal reference materials in at least digital form. With refreshable Braille displays becoming more common, who knows, I might even one day have my own OED. Another area, and it may be subsuminal under reference, is atlases and maps in Braille. Now, I've heard in some recordings maps described, and it wasn't simple, nor did the information stay with me. Many of those that do exist in Braille are dated or well worn, and there are those of us who want an overall geographic picture of where we are. Good example is when I moved to Wisconsin. I moved there from Colorado, where they have mountains, and I moved to Wisconsin, where they had lakes. And in Colorado, there aren't that many lakes that interrupt the landscape. I assure you that Wisconsin has plenty of them. So I had to go and search out a Braille textbook for children to find out where those lakes were and how it would mess up me getting from one point to another. There are no straight lines in Wisconsin. So the next area is material in the collection to encourage new Braille readers to read. It was suggested that we have some titles in uncontracted Braille, that we have a collection of titles composed of short pieces. Examples that come to mind are collections of columns, Dave Barry, people like that, the 3-minute mysteries, short poems, or a compilation of newspaper articles. The materials in this part of the collection should be designed for adults who are learning Braille or who have learned Braille and need to practice to increase their reading speed and fluency. The last group of titles I want to address is science and math. NLS does not do textbooks, but there is a desire among some adults to either refresh their knowledge or to learn math and science. There are things that have changed since I took my last science class about 40 years ago. And even then, by the way, I was unable to obtain any Braille formulas or diagrams or graphic representations. This is something that we can do better now than we did when I was growing up. Raised line drawings, all of a sudden in textbooks, are becoming expected, not one of those rare things where you'd open up the book and look through it and say, oh, wow, there's a diagram. This is cool. So they're starting to be expected. And we're just at the beginning of this, of the possibilities. My school just went out and bought a 3D printer, which can produce models. I'm excited to see what that's going to do. Finally, for those of you who are with us electronically, I want to end by saying this to you. We are at a time in the life of Braille that I can hardly grasp. Other people today will talk about production and the mechanics of how to produce it. But at the end of all things, we stand at the door of abundance in something that we've always lived with scarcity. It is up to us at this summit and to you as consumers to help us go through the door and make Braille available to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Very, very good information. Appreciate that. Our next speaker is Edo Riley, and I do know who he works for because he works for NLS. Ed is the head of our collection development section, and he supervises 4 collection development librarians. Ed?
Always a problem being oversized. I had 2 titles. One was What We Talk About When We Talk About Braille, and the other was Braille is an Ecosystem. But neither of these bears any relation to what I'm going to say, so I scrubbed them. For me, this conference started with a letter, actually, from an email from Kim Charlson about 18 months ago. I think it was January of 2012. And she said that our NLS Braille collection isn't, I quote, meeting the needs of today's readers. My blood ran cold at that point. But Kim is nothing but civil and collegial and eloquent in all things. In the course of the letter, she softened that blow somewhat. But she did anticipate some of the discussion points, the topics that are emerging, I believe, in this conference. She did suggest a consultative process for Braille selection that would work directly with the NLS Collection Development Group. Something a little more ambitious than an annual or semi-annual Collection Development Advisory Group meeting. She suggested that we shift policy to include web Braille only materials, electronic Braille only materials, which has heretofore not been kosher for our agency. And she said that the NLS should begin a serious work in collaborative fashion with other agencies and services around the country on the Braille transition, which she capitalized and was meant to refer back to the digital transition, which is a phrase that everybody got sick of over the last decade and a half. And she also said that a device, a refreshable Braille device, would be a welcome, an inexpensive refreshable Braille device would be a great help in coming to our aid. So this letter for me is bearing fruit in this 3-day conference, and I'm happy it's happening. Judy Dixon suggested to me that I not get up here and say we don't know what we're doing. So I won't say that, but I do want to admit to an absence of appropriate policy and guidance from without. We have 4 selection librarians, as Karen said, and 1 foreign language librarian at NLS, who select all the books for the national program. One of our librarians specializes in children's and young adult books, and that includes books chosen for inclusion in the print Braille collection. All of the librarians select Braille. I'm told that there was a time when we had a Braille selection specialist, but that's long ago and enshrouded in the mists of time. We used to claim to produce routinely 2,000 audiobooks and between 500 and 600 Braille books annually. The number of Braille books fell off dramatically in 2011, 2012, and I think John Bryant and others will talk about that a little in the next panel, I guess. The numbers, the 2,000 audio, 500 to 600 Braille as ideals, as targets, evolved over some years of observation of the costs of Braille, the capacities of producers, occasional suggestions from the Collection Development Advisory Group, anecdotal input from library staff and patrons, and occasional direct complaints or requests, and the usually tacit seal of approval from management. There was an unspoken rule that shorter books were better, content aside, purely for keeping up our annual tally, our annual numbers. Yes, it's true, friends. Braille selection policy evolved slowly through the 1980s. Perhaps most interestingly, the tension around the inclusion of popular or ephemeral materials, a debate that continues up to this very day. The inclusion of such materials seems to have carried the day. The Braille collection, the NLS Braille collection, has not been intensively analyzed since the 1980s. A 1983 sampling was conducted, but was flawed and non-specific and generally inadequate. NLS selection policy, nevertheless, seems to have been codified by the early 1990s. But by this time, the talking book had taken decisive command. The Braille to RC, as we used to say, ratio of approximately 1:5 was established then. A 1994 internal document of recommendations were mostly not implemented. And one of them, which was that we conduct a meaningful survey of Braille readership, has not happened because of costs and complexities and, perhaps most important, relatively low priority ascribed by LC and National Library Service Management. NLS Braille, nevertheless, and I want to put in a pitch for it, it's a very good general public library collection. Let's not ever forget that. In a traditional sense, there are, I think, 19,300 and some Braille books that were NLS-produced books. And more than half of those, I think just under 11,000, are available in electronic form on Bard now. By tradition, our selection for the Braille collection roughly replicates selection for the audiobook collection in kind. That is, the subject codes break down roughly the same way, the same proportions. And we keep track of that somewhat casually, but we do look at it. And the same proportions obtained in both collections, fiction, nonfiction at about 60 to 40%, current and retrospective at 70 to 30%, and adult and juvenile by 80 to 20%. It's the term microcosm has been used. Excuse me, could I?
Oh, yeah.
Requests from outside, pardon me, cheers. Requests from without have never been statistically significant. The Collection Development Advisory Group, originally called NAG, by the way, the National Advisory Group, but it was changed by popular demand. And before that, I think it was the Ad Hoc Advisory Group on collection building. The requests from outside, CDAG, emails, telephone calls, and regional and national conferences have never accumulated to such a degree that we could learn very much. This last CDAG that had my friend Dave Hyde on it is the first that I can remember that's produced coherent recommendations concerning the Braille collection. Coherent and cogent and focused. This was an excellent collection development advisory group. You're welcome. Carry on. And I did put the Braille, Ruth Hemphill, who just graciously thanked me, sent me the Braille-centered recommendations, and I put them on the wiki. So if you want, you can look those up. Current challenges, dilemmas faced. Inclusion of textbooks and scientific and professional works. That's a question before us. It's not our mandate. We're a recreational reading program primarily. But there seems to be a growing, snowballing interest in overlapping with other areas. We try not to exclude educational material in a very broad sense, but these are not titles that are restricted in value to use in conjunction with coursework or guided training protocols. And these often crop up in our selection of young adult nonfiction, a small subset. Must Braille withstand the test of time, Judy Dixon asks me. The idea of permanent literary, historical, or informational value informed selection policy in the early days, but it's been a gradual erosion of that notion over in all areas, in all fields. And light fiction was at one point called for. You can blame veterans, or blame women in the workplace, or blame the talking book. Still, we do pick one book over another, and at least the ghost of an idea of the test of time is still walking the halls. We look to a slightly more rigorous standard of worthiness in Braille selection than we do in audio, not necessarily based in merit, although that's always a consideration, but decidedly based on temporality. Short shelf-life fiction, one-season books, and rapidly changing data, nonfiction that presents information that is quickly outdated, are generally passed over. Sometimes several titles on a particular topic are published at the same time. One of our librarians would acquire, say, 2 biographies of Oliver Cromwell or Bach or Stephen Tyler, and assign the shorter of the 2 to Braille and the longer one to audio. And that strikes me as maybe a little bit capricious. Ultimately, a kind of cost-benefit algorithm is employed. Algorithm's too big a word, but never mind. Setting content, size, complexity, and cost into play against one another. Couple of quick examples might be of interest. John Bryant in April, I was copied on an invoice. We did a Stephen King novel called 11/22/63. 1,576 transcribed pages in 11 volumes. 43 copies were made. There were 67,768 Braille pages produced, and the total cost was $23,350.19. Incidentally, the book was also produced in audio, and 1,200 copies cost around $11,000 and came in at about $16 a copy. The Joy of Cooking, an interesting recent triumph. The total cost was $88,380.75. We have something called abstruse pricing, which means that the cost of a book is more if it has complexities, if it's not straight linear text. It's usually 40 to 50% more. Sometimes the cost is higher if the complexities are even thornier. A book that my friend, is Judy here? Judy was advocating for a book called How the States Got Their Shapes. Oh, yeah. And we were going to do that in Braille, and she thought it would be a wonderful test case for the employment of new approaches to tactile graphics. But it was dropped because the abstruse pricing was an insufficient incentive. And the producers returned the book asking for a separate contract for special effort, as I understand it. We may revisit that at some point. There's also the question of a dictionary, which we've been pursuing for a while. APH actually declined before anything was ever offered, before a bid package was ever posted. See me afterwards for the complexities of government contracting. We won't get into that now, but this stuff isn't just transacted with a phone call and a handshake. But APH averred that the project was not something they were willing to take on because of its scope. It would take up all their time. In a word, it would not justify the effort they would have to make, I guess, at a company-wide level, virtually. Take all their people, all their time, and their equipment, and they had bigger or at least other fish to fry. This is true of all reference materials, and it's an issue that we'll have to face at some point. My 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I'm editing on the fly here, friends. I haven't lost it. And this brings us up against the NLS Hardcopy Requirement and tradition. We've, in the past, and I sense this is going to change as a result, perhaps, of this conference, we have been required to circulate hard copy to all of our Braille lending libraries. And I think a couple of BRF files have snuck onto Web Braille, to Bard, under the radar, but on the whole, all of those books are represented in hard copy in our Braille lending libraries. But as we have discussed, the creation of BRF only would cost a fraction of full hard copy production and multiply output, and enable the freer selection of materials with a proximate sell-by date. But we'll, of course, be smack up against the digital divide at that point. So that has to be weighed into the question. I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to our forthcoming breakout session where I'll be taking notes and listening to you, which is my major role here at this conference. So thanks. Thank you very much.
A look behind the curtain. Our next presenter is Paul Edwards. Paul is retired these days, but he is representing the Library Users of America and the American Council of the Blind. Paul.
Good morning. I am a congenital Braille reader. And that's actually more significant than you might think. Because when you start out as a Braille reader, there are some things you get to be good at, and there are some things that you don't get to be good at. You get to be good at feeling dots, but you aren't so good at understanding tactile graphics. You get to be good at being able to read out loud and to read well, but you don't comprehend shapes effectively. I was always jealous of my friend Brian Charlson, who's an adventitious Braille reader. And Brian, essentially, was capable of walking up to a table that had tactile graphics and saying, "Oh, that's a female buffalo who's pregnant." And I essentially was saying, well, that's a two-dimensional shape that could be an animal if it tried, but I have no idea how it has 4 legs. So in making decisions about collection development, I think that one of the things that we need to consider is what is Braille particularly useful for, but more importantly, particularly with hard copy Braille, I believe that we need to seriously consider producing materials that simply make no sense to produce in audio formats. One of the questions that the last person in this group sort of gets to deal with are those that actually haven't been asked, the hard ones that haven't been asked by others. So I'm going to ask a few of those in my few minutes. Here's the first. Where is it written that it's not appropriate for Braille books to include pictures and picture descriptions? In my view, many of the books for kids and many of the books for young adults ought to have both. But also in my view, and perhaps more significantly, it seems to me that part of my congenital incapacity to understand pictures lies with the fact that nobody ever taught me how. Braille needs to do that. Braille has an obligation to do that, and the collection has an obligation to do that. I don't buy into the notion that price ought to preclude us from producing and providing both picture descriptions and picture captions. I want to talk about another area that I think is important. There are an awful lot of us now who are using web Braille. Perhaps not as many as I'd like, but those of us who use web Braille recognize that it has limitations. And in developing a collection, I believe that we need to perhaps ask BANA, perhaps ask NLS to take a leadership role in developing some standards for the production of linear Braille. And by linear Braille, what I'm describing is the fact that on virtually every refreshable Braille display that we have nowadays, what we see is just a long line of Braille that continues from the beginning of the document until the end. And what that means is it is extremely difficult for any of us who read using linear Braille to effectively translate the material that is produced, for instance, in tabular form, in a Braille book, into a format that we can effectively understand well in linear format. We don't know which numbers refer to which columns, which numbers refer to which rows. I don't think that it is impossible for the collection to develop approaches for that. And I think we may be getting to the place where what we need to consider at least are 2 separate standards. One standard for straightforward linear Braille, which would apply to textual material, and a standard for more complex books that would allow us to convey information about linear Braille in the collection. I think that that's extremely important. There are 4 other issues that I would like to spend just a smidge of time talking about. One of them is the value of diagrams. And I don't think diagrams need to be complex. But I remember growing up, I was fortunate because I had the opportunity to grow up in a number of cultures. I started my life in the U.S. and then spent some time in Canada and then moved to the Caribbean. And one of the things that I ran across in Canada, never knowing it would be useful to me later, was a book produced by the Royal National Institute for the Blind called The Armchair Guide to Cricket. Now, I don't want people laughing about The Armchair Guide to Cricket, because it was very important to me, because it actually gave me pictures of the cricket field and told me where all these players were to be placed. And there really is nothing. There really is nothing that makes it easy to know how folks are placed on a cricket field when you say, well, there's a person that's silly mid-off, and there's another person at long on, and then there's a person at square leg. So essentially, what those diagrams did was not only provide me with an understanding of where folks went on the field, but they also provided me, more importantly, with the strategy of when you placed folks in these particular positions under specific bowling circumstances. The point that I'm making with all of this is we are not, at the moment, I think, making use of Braille as a tool, and as we need to make use of it, because Braille has the potential to provide us with a whole range of diagrammatic information that we don't have. I would absolutely reinforce a lot of what Mr. Hyde said about what the collection development group came up with in terms of Braille recommendations. I think they're excellent, and I think they go absolutely in the right direction. The second of my four things is I want to talk for just a second about some other kinds of books that I think are specifically relevant that we so far haven't heard about. While we occasionally produce magazines that have words that are spelled, I think one of the things that we are finding more and more is, as larger and larger numbers of blind people are relying primarily on audiobooks for their reading, the capacity of these people to spell is becoming increasingly questionable. Any of us who read emails in Braille are appalled by the capacity of our fellow blind folks not to spell appropriately. And it's scary, and I think has a huge impact on the capacity of these folks to find and retain effective employment. There are loads and loads of statistics out there, many of which were developed by some surveys that were done by NFB and that were very good, and some research that was done by them, that suggest that Braille reading and employment are directly related to each other, and I absolutely believe this. But I think it's important in developing our collection that we focus on making materials available that will enable a lot of our folks who are blind to get access to materials that they'll look at, and also, but also to put words that are in current events out there for people to see and for people to read, and somehow create opportunities for them to learn to be better spellers, because we've got to change that paradigm. Third, I think it's crucial that we look beyond where we are now, whether we like it or not. There are huge numbers of books that are being produced in various text formats that can be relatively easily made accessible in Braille. Just as our audio collection is looking seriously at taking pre-produced audiobooks and making them available, I think that NLS and our collection development department needs to consider entering into an agreement with publishers who are producing ebooks on a regular basis, and to develop paradigms for direct translation of these ebooks into Braille that would significantly alter the costs of Braille production, recognizing that it may well be time for us to say that the only books that it is worth producing in hard copy Braille are those which are special and that we really need to put our attention into the development and eventually making available, and this is my fourth point, a refreshable Braille display as part of NLS services. I absolutely believe that there will be, over the next 5 years or so, something that will come along that will allow us to look at that as a realistic possibility. We cannot and should not accept the notion that Braille, as hard copy, is anything more than a specialized format that ought to be used for those books that simply won't work in electronic Braille format. I, as a Braille reader, probably read 2/3 or 3/4 of the materials I read in Braille from other sources than NLS, simply because they're available more quickly, simply because translators and electronic devices do a pretty credible job of producing readable Braille. The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is let's get out of the box. Let's recognize that developing a collection that's appropriate and effective in Braille means tearing down all the doors and windows and developing and implementing an absolute huge hurricane of fresh air into a collection development policy that in the past has lacked fresh air altogether. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, panel. You've raised a lot of intriguing and important questions. We do have, at this point, some time, because I made them hurry up. Sorry, Danielle. We do have some time for questions. Do we have somebody who will run the mic? We do not have somebody who will run the mic? Oh, here's the mic. It's not on yet. There's that problem.
Oh, just okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm Catherine Thomas. I do some work for NLS, scanning hard copy Braille books into the computer for web Braille, which basically makes me a Braille digitizer. But in any case, I also do a lot of research in the online catalog, and I must tell you all that there are, at this point, no Braille reference spellers in the catalog. There's very little Braille instruction material. Most of the things that have to do with learning Braille in the NLS catalog have to do with why we should learn Braille, or possibly biographies of Louis Braille. So I think we need more stuff there. But the last thing I want to inquire about from anybody here from American Printing House or some of the other production facilities is there were computer files made. Braille has been on computer for a while. The production houses went from zinc plates quite a while back, I guess. Are there computer files that were made, say, between 1980 and 1990-something that never ended up on web Braille? Maybe we should look around and see if some of the production houses have things that have already been produced and that could just be posted to web Braille. And those are the things I want to say. And if anybody wants to learn more about optical Braille recognition, please come and see me at my table tomorrow, and I'd be happy to talk to you, because even thermoform copies of books can be added to the computer and saved from extinction.
Thank you, Catherine. I know that we have done some work looking with the production houses regarding old Braille old files, and we will continue to see what we can get. Next question. Am I still on the mic?
Okay. Tuck Tinsley. Ed, just a quick question about the Stephen King novel about the assassination of Kennedy. When you mentioned 67,000 Braille pages for $20-some thousand, is that good or bad, or are you happy with it or sad with it?
It's expensive.
I think Karen said it for us. I just thought it was interesting in itself, the price of that fat novel.
And it's not that we think you should do it for less, Tuck. It's just that we know that this is the world right now.
There you go.
Hi, Don Horn. Has any thought been put into using Braille production as a supplement in certain books? For example, there are certain books where textual information might be fine using auditory, but yet there are charts. Like I'm a rehab counselor, so we do a lot of career development. Well, there's an awful lot of books where there's a lot of text, but then there's these exercise sheets to fill out if you're trying to look at where your interests and abilities are. And since we're looking at cutting back, and I know there may be copyright issues and everything else, but it might be very useful to be able to have like a workbook that had the things that were really necessary to look at on paper in Braille while using an audio text to get other information that's narrative in nature.
That's certainly an approach that should go into the bucket of things we need to look at.
One of the things that I think is an example of what Don's talking about is what National Braille Press is doing with iPhones. So they have books on iPhones and iPads, and now have a separate book of diagrams that are available for both. And I think that Don is correct in suggesting that there are certainly some materials that it would be helpful for us to have. I think a lot of blind people are unsuccessful at jobs because they're never forced to learn to understand graphs and diagrams.
Hi, Pete Osborne from RNIB. We talk about collection development as an area of work. For me, it's about deselection in a sense, because we're actually having to make decisions to deselect stuff that we can't do for whatever reason. And while we're in that sort of frame of mind, I think we that's quite a challenge for us. But my more general point is that I think there is increasingly now a difference between materials which can and should be read in a refreshable Braille form. And those which need to be produced in hard copy. And I think any policy that comes out of this needs to have both of those dimensions clearly spelt out. My general view is that pretty much anything should be able to be read in refreshable Braille form now. Yes, there may need to be some supplementary diagram work, and I think that's important. But I think built on that, we need to more clearly describe what we actually produce in hard copy as a subset of that. So I think there's two dimensions: the superset, which is everything that can be read in refreshable Braille, and a subset, which then can be read in hard copy.
Okay, one over here.
Thank you. Next comment or question?
Curtis Chong from New Mexico. I think it was mentioned earlier that there's a place where hard copy can be produced on demand. In other words, if you have the electronic Braille files available and a consumer wants the copy, then a library should be able to run it off. It seems to me logical to consider. I want to say as a consumer, first of all, I surely hope we're not to the place yet where refreshable Braille displays are so ubiquitous that we can forget about hard copy Braille for plain text material. Please, we're not there. Therefore, recognizing the high cost of producing multiple copies of books at the beginning, 112263, for example, it seems to me that there is a lot of possibility here for considering taking the files, putting them out there, and finding ways to change the infrastructure so that the regional libraries can produce these books when the patron wants them, as opposed to having to run these multiple copies off at the beginning. I don't know, having not done the number analysis, whether this would reduce the ultimate cost. but it might move the pain down the road a little further. Comments on that from the panel?
I don't want the pain.
Danielle doesn't want the pain. I think the idea of Braille on demand is one that is another one that needs to go into the bucket of ideas. Whether or not Danielle and her cohorts would end up being the producers, or whether it would be something else, is yet to be determined. But certainly that is a concept of the hour. We're seeing that in Europe, and they seem to be very happy with it. So,
I think the other issue that's out there with regard to your question, Curtis, is how do state libraries develop infrastructures in terms of the size of the buildings that they need and so on, if it's uncertain what kind of physical product they're going to end up getting into their libraries?
Hi, this is, I'm sorry.
Just a second.
I was just going to echo what Paul said. And Curtis, of course we would love to do that. I mean, I would love to have that pane, but would we be supplied with embossers? Would we be supplied with more space? Not every regional library even produces Braille at all, whether they emboss it on demand or not. It's not something that's required of the regional libraries. So if we did have that shift, there would have to be a lot of thought going into how that would be funded and supported.
Hi, this is Brian McDonald with National Braille Press. Tying on to what you said a minute ago, Curtis, we are the next unit on production. I think I would add, and I'm sure Tuck would agree with me and the other producers, that there is this cost factor, which we certainly are part of that problem too. We did the joy of cooking. I admit that. I will also say that at that time was larger than the... No. But what I'm saying is it was also, I will say, larger than the Bible. It was a very large production project. But at the same time, as we go into the next discussion, I think we'll also, if we could merge these together, would have been great. Obviously, we can't. How we look at that quality control on those issues are part of that cost factor that needs to be looked at in the paradigm of how we as producers charge NLS too. And I think there's a combination of things. We're at this crossroads of not at the digital e-Braille world completely with affordable technology, but at the same time trying to reduce costs and make it more efficient to get more output. So we're getting there, but I think the next discussion will help answer some of the questions people have right now even. So that's all I want to say.
I just want to say to that point about the cost, and that is that we have a budget that is not expanding, let us say, and this is why that becomes an interesting question. Do we do one Joy of Cooking, or do we do 10 or 12 other books? I mean, these are the kinds of questions that Ed has to wrestle with as we decide what we're going to give to somebody at this point. So we do appreciate all you producers who do these big books for us, and we know that you deserve every penny that you get, so that's not the issue. We're time for maybe one more question, and then we're going to go ahead to our breakouts.
I'm Terry Gorman, and I have some responsibility for suggesting to Kurt Silke that he do the Joy of Cooking. I'd like to offer a thought about the Joy of Cooking, actually. Well, let's say that a person has the audio edition of that book, and chooses not to use the Braille edition at home, or even the electronic edition. It would be really nice if there were a bound volume of the index with the audio points. So that you could type in on your Victor Stream or your some device like that what the position is of a recipe, and you could go right to it. I actually was going to experiment with producing a book like that, and I decided not to. But in conjunction with that, I think you guys should abandon that 38 character line length and go to line lengths that 40 or 42 characters, because it was surprising how, the index in that book, I think, takes like 3 volumes of the 30. I think maybe 2.5 volumes of the 30. But I think an index, in supplementing some of these large books, like if you ever did a dictionary on audio, you could do a Braille separate index with with the points, with the numbered headings.
Thank you. In the bucket. Thank you. All right. At this point, we're going to take the last 5 minutes of my time because I think that we are on a very tight schedule. As you know, we gave you 5 minutes to get into your new places and get settled. That's not quite enough, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes of our time. Please go to your room, and
Yes, go to your
Mary
room.
Nell is going to explain it to you.
Got it.
Okay.
Go to your room.
Hold on just a second, everybody. We want to reiterate the process for your knowing which room to go to, and we have a little bit practice after yesterday. But in your name tags, you should have a list of the breakout sessions, the work groups to which you've been assigned. So across the top, there are 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3, and they correspond with the breakout session number. So the middle number on the top row should tell you where you'll be going today. Group number 1 will meet in this room. Group number 2 is the student center. So if you go out, let's reference the coffee. That was really important. So where the coffee is, or the registration desk, it's to the right at the end of that hall. The flex, number 3 is the large conference room, and that's on 2nd floor. And group number 4, with Beth Caruso and John, will be the flex room, which is right across the hall. If you go out the doors behind you, flex is right there. Let me tell you what we'll be doing today. This is different from our system yesterday. Your focus question today will be to identify factors that are working in the selection of Braille titles by NLS and its network of libraries, as well as to identify things that should be changed in order to improve the effectiveness of Braille title selection. We're going to use a very tried and true process frequently used in business or manufacturing or education, a plus delta. So we'll be looking at the pluses as well as the things that need to be changed. Then at the end, you'll be given an opportunity for multi-voting. You'll have 3 votes, and we will ask each group to identify the top 5 priorities. So your focus questions will be, 1, the plus question. What is working about the selection of NLS materials produced in Braille? Your delta question will be, what needs to be improved or changed in the selection of Braille materials? And I'm going to leave you with a quote from Stephen Wright. We all know that in your input, your feedback is essential, but Stephen Wright said, if it's a penny for your thoughts and you put in your 2 cents worth, then somebody somewhere is making a penny. So, with that thought, take a break and move quickly to your rooms. We'll have an hour to do an awful lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Very good. No, I'm glad you did.
And I'll do that for you.
Okay, great.
I let me have that. Hang on, that was my favorite from yesterday.
You too.
I wanted to, you wanted me to come up, or you were going to call, or whatever.
Oh, I'm glad you did.
I'll do that. I think it helps to frame